It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
What are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better... Sheriff, Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
I'm Miriam.
And I'm Gwen.
And you're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. We're going to be talking to Chewy, who is from Idaho, and he lives near a canyon, and he decided to go down to this canyon. He met a good friend of his, Raymond, who we will also be talking to, and Raymond actually is a federal investigator, and so they go down into the canyon. They have an encounter down in the canyon, and Chewy goes home. Chewy doesn't live, he's out in the country. He doesn't live far from this canyon, and he starts experiencing weird things around his house. Something on his roof, his children and his wife telling him they saw an upright dog looking over the fence, 7-foot tall fence, and just a lot of really bizarre things going on and around Chewy's home. And so we'll be going into all of that tonight. Thank you so much for being here tonight. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Chewy to the show. Chewy, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, you bet, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I also want to welcome Raymond to the show. Raymond, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Wes. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I know you and I will be doing a separate interview to kind of go over the encounters you've had without Chewy. But you guys are both out there in Idaho. And Chewy, I'll start with you. Why don't you tell us how you guys met and kind of walk us into your first encounter?
Yeah, you bet. Well, when I first met Raymond, he had a Bigfoot sticker on the back of his truck, and that sparked my interest because, I've had some, an encounter years ago, and, my family's had encounters with Bigfoot. So we just, started talking, and before we knew it, we had the same interests, the same beliefs, and that kind of kicked it off. And so what led us to our first adventure was, him telling me he was really like kind of showed me more, like open the window, and I got to see how vast these creatures, cryptids were, and researching all the encounters that happen here in our canyon here in Idaho and Twin Falls. And those of you guys who know the area here in Idaho, it's the city rests on the edge of a giant canyon that's actually deeper than the Grand Canyon. just a massive canyon, and it has break-offs of smaller canyons that run through our whole area. And one of those small break-offs is actually like 3 blocks from my house. It's just down the street, less than 3 blocks. And so Raymond and I decided to go and just to investigate the area by my house. Just one of the reasons why is, when we first moved here, we went to the canyon rim and we wanted to go hiking. And I remember asking the house is closest to the canyon, if there was a trail. And the gentleman said, no, there's not, that we shouldn't go that way. And I went anyway, and there was a trail, and we just hiked down a little bit. And like a few days after that, the city put up a giant fence with, a welded bar fence, and it was off limits. You couldn't go in there anymore. So when I told Raymond this, he's like, oh, we got to go down and check it out. So that's what we did. We went down there in the daytime, drove in my vehicle from my house down there. Like I said, it's just down the street. But we weren't planning on staying at night till nighttime, because in the canyon, it gets darker a lot faster, and it gets pitch black when it gets dark. So we weren't carrying flashlights or anything. So we're down there walking, we grab a little piece of grass and you put it between your thumbs, and you could do like wounded rabbit calls and stuff. So we were doing that, and we heard a giant growl, and this growl, we assumed it was a mountain lion. It sounded like a mountain lion. And in that general area, we remember like looking up the tree and seeing this tree that was just shredded. I mean, it was like 10 to 12 foot up this tree, like somebody just took a chainsaw and shredded the heck out of it. And so we knew like, ooh, that looks like a grizzly or something, but there are no grizzlies here in this part of Idaho. So we turned around. We thought it was wise. We went the opposite direction, and we get to hiking, and we're talking, having a good time, talking about cryptid stuff and just our different perspectives of what these creatures are. Mainly Bigfoot. That's what we went down there for, was to see if there were signs of Bigfoot, because they're reported here in this area. And we're walking, and before we know it, it's dark, because we're just having fun out there hiking and enjoying the scenery. And it turned dark, and we're like, man, we, got ahead of ourselves. We're like an hour away from the truck. So right when it starts to get dark, we start hearing movement around us, like twigs breaking, rustling, and for me, I'm already terrified. I don't even have a weapon. Like Raymond's the one, he's carrying like a 41 caliber, and I don't have anything. I think I have like a pocket knife. And so I'm walking in, and this is like my first real investigation, or, whatever you want to call it. So I'm like really scared. And then we start hearing all this movement around us, and it sounds like multiple animals or whatever moving out there in the brush. And we live in the desert area here in Idaho, in the Magic Valley. But in the canyon, if you go down there, it's like a tropical forest. It's crazy. The dense raspberry bushes. There's all kinds of Russian olives. It looks like almost like The Hobbit. So like the Lord of the Rings kind of a feel down there. So it's pretty cool. So we're hearing all that rustling and stuff. And ahead of us, maybe about, maybe 75 feet, 50 feet or so, there's this giant black mass, and it's on 2 legs, and it's like darker than the dark around it. And just so you guys remember, the canyon, it gets dark down there. So this giant mass, I see it, and I'm like, I'm not saying anything. And I'm like, no, this has got to be like a tree or stump or something. And then it runs across a trail on 2 legs, and it just zips by, and my heart just dropped. And again, I didn't say anything. I'm like, my eyes are playing tricks on me. Like, this didn't just happen. And then Raymond confirmed it. He says the creature just passed in front of us on the trail. And so I lost it. I didn't want to be there anymore. I was terrified, because when somebody confirms your worst fear, you're like, I think I just saw something. Please, Lord, that wasn't it, right? And then they're like, something's there.
Yeah.
And so we started backing up, and we started walking back the opposite way again, because the truck was the halfway point, and this creature or creatures stayed in the brush, and we could hear it like following us, like paralleling us all the way to where, because the canyon, there's a part of it where it's the trees are covering the trail, so it's like a canopy, and that's where it's the pitch black. And then once the trees stop, the moonlight opens up, and it, like, I remember it didn't come into the light of the moon, it stayed under the canopy of the darkness. And so we get into my ride and we come home, and it's again just down the street, and we're thinking, and we're like, man, this is what just happened. What did we see? And we're like, we've seen a Bigfoot, you know? And so we open a bottle of whiskey and we start drinking the whiskey, and we're talking like that just happened down the street from my house, you know, like literally it's there, you know, and we're trying to figure out what it was and how big it was. And, you know, it was on two legs for sure. It couldn't have been a person out there, you know, that's what we're thinking. So about a week, and this was November.
Before you go into it, Chewy, because I know the story gets much worse and it changes. Before we jump on to the next portion of it, Raymond, let me ask you. So when you guys were walking down the trail, what was it that you saw?
I saw 80 to 100 feet in front of us. I saw a huge mass run from left to right in 3 strides, and the area that it ran, I went back and I checked the measurement, it was about 30 feet. So it covered 30 feet in 3 strides. If I was to estimate the size of this thing, just the outline, I would say it must have been 400 to 700 pounds. I grew up in the woods. I grew up hunting. I've hunted all sorts of game in the United States, minus bear. I've never shot a bear, but I'm pretty, you know, I grew up on a farm. I'm pretty good at guessing the weight of animals. This thing was huge. And I had a feeling that we were in danger and we were not wanted down there. And that's why I always pray and I always carry a sidearm, a magnum, whether it's a short bolt or a magnum pistol.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And before I get back to Chewy, I wanted to ask you, because I'm going to have you on the show, and I know you're from my neck of the woods, so we'll talk about your encounters, but why did you have the feeling like you weren't welcome? Was it just kind of just a gut feeling, or did something?
It was that feeling of dread. I don't know how many people have ever felt that, but anytime I've come in contact with a cryptid being, I always had that feeling of dread, like your child's in the hospital and they're not going to recover, or your marriage is on the rocks and it's going to be hard, or you've got an illness that you can't kick. That feeling of dread is what I felt after we heard that scream. We were doing wounded rabbit calls with our thumbs earlier, and we were just, you know, messing around. When we heard that scream growl, which the only thing I could relate it to was a cougar, I started thinking, we need to get out of here. And as we were heading out of the way, we decided to just push our luck a little bit, because we know that if you give these things an advantage, they have more likely to show themselves.
Did it make you nervous when it was pacing? I mean, I know Chewy was nervous. I mean, he only had a knife. But did it make you nervous as it was pacing you out? You know that, and I don't know if you've ever experienced that before, but where you stop, they stop. You move, they move.
Yep. We were escorted out. We were not wanted. I think that if they wanted to get us, we would have been had. I just think that we interrupted something down there and they didn't want us around. And so they showed themselves enough to terrify us. And then however they project those feelings where it causes you to be in the most terrible place in your mind that you've ever been, that terror, that dread. And I've developed a discipline where I can pray and I can begin to meditate on the Word of God, because I used to be a minister. I'm still an ordained pastor, but I don't have a church right now. So I've spent a lot of time with the experiences that I've had learning how to deal with that fear and that dread. And I was having a hard time keeping that fear and that dread down, even though I felt I was pretty well protected with the firearm I had. At least one of us would be getting away.
Yeah, I had one of you guys. Yeah, I was thinking, you were telling me you were a Star Trek fan before we started the show, and I was thinking Chewie's a red shirt guy. Poor guy has got a knife, and you got the gun. Star Trek reference.
Yep, I understand.
Sorry, Chewie. Um, so Chewie, you guys go back. You guys are drinking it up, talking about what you saw. I would imagine, it's your heart's probably going a million miles an hour. So I would have sat and drank with you guys too as well if I was in that situation. So what happens next, Chewie?
Well, just so you guys know, I'm of Hispanic Mexican heritage, and Raymond is he's corn-fed white boy, right? So we were joking. He's redneck white boy. We were joking, saying like, "Man, I hope this thing likes white meat and not dark meat." It had a choice of whatever it wanted, the white or the dark meat. So
Yeah,
I couldn't decide. So, anyways.
I gotcha.
We were on the menu.
Yeah, we were on the menu. Well, so we're here, we're having a good time talking about it, and it's really in shock. And this was November of 2018. So, the snow was already starting. I remember when we went, there was still patches of snow. So about a week later, and I've told my wife about it, but I didn't get too detailed. She doesn't like to mess around with any of this stuff. And she told me one night, about a week after, that something loud thumped on top of my roof. And she said it sounded massive, and it was right above our bed. And she could hear it walking like on two legs. And she was frozen in fear. She couldn't move. She said she wanted to yell. She wanted to wake me up, but she couldn't move. And she laid there what seemed forever, she said, as this thing walked on our roof. And then she was thinking, as the time went on, she's like, was that a dream? She was able to move again. She's like, I think that was a dream. I'm not going to wake Chewie up, And so in the morning, she told me what happened. And I'm like, are you serious? I was like, something was up there? She's all, something was up there. Or it was a dream. Something happened. So I go outside, and it was snowing. And I look on my roof, and I could see tracks on top of my roof right where my bedroom is at, but the snow is covering it, but you could see the tracks. And I don't know why, I just looked on the house next to me, and there's tracks on their roof too. And on the house next to them, like, my mind is like, what? Something was walking on our roofs at 3-4 in the morning, and it traveled like it was going to the canyon, because the canyon's just down the street to the left of me, a few houses away. So my mind went there. I'm like, I think something was there, and I was like, man, I don't know what to think of this. Maybe it was just a bird or something. My heart was hoping that, because I've never heard of a Bigfoot coming in, being on your roof, because that's what we thought we saw that night. And so a few days later, and I'm on edge already, right? I'm on edge. I'm already thinking the worst case scenarios of all kinds of things. And a few days later, maybe a week or so, I'm woken up around 3 or 4 in the morning. Something like a thump woke me up in the house. So I got up, and I come, and I'm like, I heard something. Something woke me up. And there's times if anybody's listening, if you wake up at night, something woke you up. It's either a creak in the house or something. Like, I know that something woke me up, and I woke up for a reason. So I went and I checked the doors. Doors were locked. Made sure my 2 daughters, I have a little 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. They were sleeping, tucked away in their bed, and my wife was sleeping. So I just stayed up for a little bit, and I was thinking about the roof thing. I'm like, man, was that from the roof or just, what was it? And I stayed up a little bit, and I ended up going back to bed. So then I woke when the sunlight came out. I went outside just to look again. And sure enough, there was fresh tracks out there. It wasn't snowing in the early morning hours. And I got my ladder, and I looked up there, and the tracks I was thinking maybe it's the Bigfoot, but they weren't human looking. They were like triangle, they were wide on one end like a triangle, and they thinned out like thin it was weird, but they were bipedal. And I could send those those pictures to you, Wes, if you want. I still have them on my phone.
Yeah,
And then again,
I would. I didn't mean to cut you off, Chewy. I would love to. I would love to see them. And so I have your description right. The front, so where your toes are at, is the fattest part of the triangle, and as it goes back to the heel, that's where it turns into kind of that's where the what would be the top of a triangle.
yeah, exactly. That's how it looked. It looked like whatever it was, had wide feet and then it thinned out. So I didn't know what it was. I've never seen anything like that. And I couldn't get too close to it because, again, I have vaulted ceilings. I have a high house. And so I just couldn't believe that something can get up on my roof and it's that high. I'm like, what the heck's going on? It had to have been a bird or something. And then I looked to the left of me and the house on the side of me has tracks again, the same ones that are on my house. And whatever it was, again, was traveling on our rooftops to the canyon. And so I'm freaking out. And I call Raymond up and I tell him what's happening. And I tell him like, hey, I think a Bigfoot followed me home, man. And it was on top of my roof. He says, maybe it was a juvenile, possibly. He goes, but I think it was a dog man, he says. And that's what kind of opened up the whole world for me. And I'm like, what is that? I didn't even know there were different types of Bigfoot.
Yeah.
I seen the patty footage, and I'm like, that's what a Bigfoot is. I had no idea there were different types, and
Yeah, I think Raymond's actually right. I've seen that track in Texas, and it was pretty unnerving when I saw it. And the reason why we found the track is what we heard that night. But it didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. It's bizarre. How big do you think that track was? The size of a man's foot, or?
I'd say they looked at least the size of a foot. At least of mine. I'm a size 10. I would say they were at least my size. But it was weird because they were long. It was long. They were long tracks, which was so strange. And I'll send you some more pictures. But anyways, talking with Raymond, he tells me that he was maybe a dog man, and so it opens up the door, and I start researching dog man, and I start hearing lots of encounters of them on top of roofs, traveling on roofs, being spotted on the roofs, following you home, them tracking you, and all these weird coincidences. I'm like, dude, that had to have been what was at my house, a dog man that we saw down there. Maybe it wasn't a Bigfoot we saw. Maybe that giant black mass that made us terrified. It like made us fearful, and maybe that was a dog man that followed me home. And we've had several other things happen around my house since then, where I'm 100% sure it's like some kind of dog man or something weird like that.
Tell me what kind of experiences. What happened?
Well, I've never I didn't tell my girls really about what happened or about Dog Man or anything like that. But my daughter would hear tapping on her window. She said it sounded like she thought it was a rock. She's like, it sounded like somebody took a rock and tapped it, because it didn't sound like a finger. It sounded hard. She said she's 8 years old. So I'm thinking I didn't want to freak her out, but my mind is like a nail, like a nail, a finger with a nail or something, tapping late at night, 3, 4 in the morning. And she tells me that, and my wife and our dog, the dog will bark at random times on our ceiling, on certain parts of the wall, like at 2, 3 in the morning that'll go outside, she'll be barking and stuff. And I invested in an alarm system for all my windows. Every window, every door has an alarm in case, because I started researching about them drawing kids out because they're like predatory and stuff. So, and my kids will, anytime a window opens, I'm gonna know about it. But so with that said, my wife is a teacher, and during this whole COVID-19 stuff, she teaches off her computer, and she's outside in the backyard, and we have about a 7, maybe 8 foot vinyl fence that surrounds our property. And she tells me she was on our back porch in the middle of the day doing her work. She said it looked like a German Shepherd head popped up and looked at her in the corner of her eye. And when she turned around to look, she said it was gone. It was there 1 second and it was gone. And so I'm like asking her, like, what did it look like? Like, tell me more. She says it had ears like a Doberman pinscher, but it looked like those black German shepherds. And I'm like, babe, that fence is 7-8 foot tall. I can't look over even if I jump. And so whatever it was, she said it looked like a dog head, that like some kind of canine that looked at her, and she began to pray because she's a devout Christian woman. She doesn't mess with any of this stuff. She swears that it's something spiritual. She goes, how can it be there 1 second and gone the next? And another thing is, I'm here in my man cave right now as I'm recording this, talking with you, Wes, and I remember my kids screaming in the middle of the daytime. Them coming, I hear them coming in the back door, and so I go out of my man cave and I go inside, like, what's going on? They're like literally on the verge of crying, and they say that somebody or something banged on the fence, and they shook the whole fence, and they thought it was me. They're like, that was you, right, Dad? You went out there and you banged and you shook the whole fence. I'm like, I wasn't out there, guys. I was in here. And so I go, maybe the gate got shut. Maybe Mom shut the gate and it shook the whole vinyl fence. They're like, no, Mom was inside. And so they were convinced that, they said it sounded like multiple things around it shaking the fence and pounding it with their fist. And so they screamed. They ran inside. I went and checked it out. There was nothing there. So that was really creepy. And about a month and a half ago, I had to actually call the Fish and Game. On this canyon rim, by my house, there's a beautiful trail, and people go bike riding. You can go on night walks or whatever. It has a slight downhill grade. And so me and my 8-year-old, we go on bike rides often. So we go on this canyon rim, and she's in front of me just because as I'm going downhill, if something happens to her, I will come to her like faster. But if she's behind me, something happens, I have to ride uphill to her or run uphill. So she was in front of me, and we're going, and she's maybe 30 feet. And as we round that corner to get on that trail, there's a German Shepherd pup that lives on one of those houses, and it doesn't have a fence. It's like an open area that leads to the canyon. And the dog is barking, and we never hear it bark. It's never barking. And I didn't think about this until afterwards, but it's barking and barking, looking at this general location. But there's rock chucks, and there's birds and raccoons and all kinds of stuff out there. And right across the street on the other side of the canyon is a livestock commission where they sell beef cattle. But we're going down, and she's 30 feet in front of me, and she gets to this location, and she flies off her bike, rolls off into goat heads. She's got them all stuck in her. She just takes off towards the complete opposite direction. And by the time and she's screaming, it's there. She goes, it's there. She's screaming. And by the time I get there, I just hear the rustling in the bushes, and I see black fur. That's all I can see is black fur and rustling. And I'm backing up, and I'm off my bike, and I'm backing up towards her, and she runs to me, and she's crying. She literally is crying. And I'm like, what did you see? She said it looked like she said it was gonna grab me. She goes, looked like it was gonna grab me. It's black, and it had ears. She thought it was a black bear. She goes, I think it was a black bear because it had the big ears. She goes, it looked at me, and it came towards me, and then it seen you, and it ran back into the bush. And I'm like, well, do you think it was a bear? And she's like, she goes, it had the mouth like a bear and the ears pointing up like a bear. And that's what her mind goes. When you see something you can't really explain, your mind goes to something that you could reckon, So that's what she said. And I started digging her brain, and she told me that it had a massive neck. I'm like, was it small or was it big? She goes, it had a big neck. And I'm thinking about it. I'm like a mane or something, like whatever it was, has more hair around the neck than it does anywhere else. And so I called the Fish and Game, and they came down, and they were packing heat, and they wouldn't go in there, but they were looking around, and they're like, whatever it was didn't leave any tracks. It wasn't in a spot with dirt or mud. It knew, they were saying, it knew what it was doing almost, not to leave a trace. And so he asked me, has there been any reports of big black dogs around here? And I didn't say anything about a dog. I didn't say anything about a dog. And I said, no, there, not that I know of. I told him, have you heard reports of the big black dogs? He was like, no, I'm just trying to see maybe if she saw a Labrador or something. And I'm like, I don't think that was a Labrador, man, that she saw. And he wouldn't go in the bush, but he had his gun ready. And he's like, okay, well, don't come out here at night. If you do, come in groups and make lots of noise. He's like, we're going to investigate it, and we're just going to see what. He goes, we can't put traps right here in this area. He goes, but I'm going to talk to my supervisors and see what we could do. And that's the same area that we heard the growl, the same general area where we saw the shredding of the tree. And it's the same, it's pretty much the same area where the creature was that we saw. And that same canyon system, I remember popping fireworks on New Year's of 2019, and I was the only one on the street doing it. And I remember lighting them off, and I heard the most pissed off scream slash yell slash howl. I can't even explain it over the fireworks. And I remember my wife saying, what is that? And then as the fireworks died down, the yell howl was still going. And I got a sense that whatever it was pissed off that we were popping fireworks, like it didn't like it. And we went inside. We cut our firework show short that night. So that's kind of what's been happening. And what I did was I have a plum tree in my backyard. And, me being a Christian man and a man of faith, I made some crosses out of the wood, and I put anointing oil, and I buried them in the four corners of my property and prayed over it and basically asked for a hedge of protection. And we haven't had anything happen on the property itself, like in my general area, since that happened.
Yeah, kind of a bummer going out looking for Bigfoot and running into something else. Raymond, let me ask you, and that's terrifying, Chewy. That whole thing's terrifying. And I got a roof story for you later. But Raymond, so you go over there, and I'm assuming you looked at the tracks?
Yes, sir.
What did you think when you first saw them?
I was going, that's not typical Sasquatch behavior that I know of. I am not an expert. I'm really not a researcher. By trade, I am a federal investigator. So those skills I've learned over the years, I know how to do that. But again, as far as a cryptid investigator, I'm just a life witness. And I'm not an expert in any of this. I just see, witness, hear other people's accounts, and try to make the best of it. And as I'm looking at them, I'm going, you can see that the toes are more prominent, but the heel is more slender. And it looks to me like a large raccoon track. And I've seen online a lot of dogman prints that look real similar to that. And because this is a more rural area, Chewy lives out kind of on the outskirts of town, where this canyon goes completely through the middle of our city. And it goes for a couple hundred miles up to the mountains. So this is a perfect passageway for these creatures. Like we all learned from the movie Boggy Creek, they always follow the creeks. They always follow the waterways as their highways and byways. And but with this, I just said, Chewy, I don't think this is a Sasquatch behavior. I think it's more of a dogman, just because from stories that I've listened from others, and then just being a hunter myself, knowing how different animals do different things in the natural, let alone being a cryptid.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you, Raymond. I remember I found that same track, what Chewy's talking about, on his roof out in Texas, and it unnerved me when I saw it, because it was weird, especially the heel. I've never seen a heel that print that would go back like that on such a large scale. You would think all of its weight is carried on its front toes. When I looked at it, that's what I thought. The reason why we found the track is the real brief story. We were out that night, and we heard something roaring and coming down this ridgeline towards us, but it did not sound like any Sasquatch recordings I'd ever heard. It sounded very different. And then we found those tracks, and I thought, oh, great. And I wasn't really sure what Dogman was. Still not sure what it was, but that was kind of the first thing that hit my mind is This looks like a canine type track.
Yeah, I've seen those too. Looking online, it just opened the whole world for me because you know my I've lived in Hayes County, Texas, where the Blanco River, and I mean that's hot spot galore for Bigfoot and for Dogman. There's so many encounters, and I've lived there, and I have family from Michigan. My grandma lived in Michigan several years, and my uncle, he is from Michigan. They used to talk. They call it the Wolf Man, or werewolf. But my grandma would tell me stories as a kid how in Michigan that the Wolfman would eat the homeless people, that they would come up missing from. They lived in Saginaw area, I believe, that, and it would also eat the homeless people who came on the train tracks, like who would take, they would hitch rides on the tracks, that it would live around the tracks and it would prey on the homeless people. And so they knew about the werewolf, but the term dogman I never heard of the term dogman. But I remember as my uncle, who is from Michigan, when we lived in Texas, he told me a story that really made me a believer in Bigfoot, and the story he shared with me is in Hayes County. It's really swampy. There's a lot of reeds. It's pretty cool looking, but he's a teenager and he's on a back road over there, and him and his friends pull over on the side of a little back road that's full of reeds and trees and stuff, and they're smoking weed. They're like rolling their joints and they're getting high, and they're teenagers and they're having a good time, and their windows are down and the reeds are right next to my uncle's face. His windows down. He says that two giant hands separated the reeds, and he says the Bigfoot lowered its face and it was like a foot from his face, and it locked eyes with him. And he says it looked at everybody in the car one by one, like it was sizing them up, and it looked at them all, and then it just let the reeds go and it walked away. But he says like he was like traumatized from it because it was so close to him, and he said it was the ugliest looking thing he's ever saw in his life, and nobody believed them because they were getting high, and he told me that there. And I was so intrigued. I'm like, I know Bigfoot is real, so I've always been a believer. And I didn't know there was different types though. I had a friend who stayed over at my house, and we're watching a scary movie, and I remember we heard creaking on the patio, and we looked, there was nothing there, and we're like hyped up as kids, like, oh, it's just a scary movie. And then we go back to watching the movie and we heard the creak again. I didn't look, I kept watching the movie, but my friend looked and he screamed bloody murder. And my grandpa comes running out with a shotgun, and he says that a baboon looked through the window, the porch window, and looked at us. He described it as a baboon. My grandpa goes out, turns on the floodlights, has a shotgun. There's woods around us and stuff, and there's nothing out there. And I remember hearing that, or I remember that, and I remember feeling like it was just something that he made up in his mind because we were watching a scary movie to see a baboon look through the window. But now I've heard so many reports of these baboon-looking cryptids, that they don't, it's almost like a different type of Bigfoot or something. But that opened it all, and I started examining all the stuff in my life, and I'm like, man, what's going on here? What are the odds that I lived in Hayes County, my family's from Michigan, I live here by the canyon, which is like the deepest gorge in America, and I'll send you some pictures of the cave systems here. The largest lava cave system in the world is just outside of Twin Falls. People come from all around the world to check it out, and I've gone down there, and you can go and walk down there, but they only let you go to a certain distance, like a half a mile or something underground, and then they block it off, and they don't let you go. But I've heard stories of the caves here in the canyon that will lead to the lava cave system. So it's just a huge system that goes underground and everything. So there's a lot of possibility that these creatures could come from the mountains. I mean, they can travel and come and go as they want,
No doubt. You have to keep me up to date. Let me know if anything else happens out there, will you?
Oh, I will, absolutely. There's the missing 411. I didn't know anything about this stuff, man, until the dog man came to my house, and then I started researching it. And then I find out an hour and a half from my house is where they filmed the first documentary film of missing 411. Was in Idaho, Pocatello area, Idaho Falls, Pocatello area. It's not far from me. So I'm like, so I just, when they say the more you know, the worse off you are.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Ignorance is bliss.
It's true. And Raymond, you said you had a Halloween story with you and Chewy. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. I went over to Chewy's house and I said, hey, Chewy, I'm going down to Rock Creek Canyon tonight. I'm going to leave about 10 o'clock and I'm going to probably be back by 2 to 3. And he says, well, what are you doing? I said, I want to go mess with the dogman, the Sasquatch, or anybody that's down there doing weird rituals. And he goes, you're crazy. I want to come. I said, all right, we're going to pick up my son who worked for Fish and Game at the time, and we'll call him Patrick. And so he was doing an intern for the fisheries. And so that gives him a little bit of credibility. And so we go down, and Patrick drives us, and we go down to the ramp that was built to go into the canyon, and it's pitch black. It's 10:30 at night, and it just feels really creepy, and it's dark. And Chewy pulls out his phone and his Bluetooth speaker. And have you ever heard of the siren call from the Sasquatch, I think, in the Sierra Nevadas?
Yeah, are you talking about like the Ohio call? That it sounds like a siren?
It's similar to the Ohio call, yes. And which I've heard other podcasters share that, and they've had other alphas come down and challenge them and scare the crud out of them. So I'm going, this is a good soundbite to challenge something. And then Chewy started doing some supposed dogman howls, and so we're really pressing our luck. And Patrick's getting scared, and Chewy's going, dude, it's awesome. And the woods come to life. It's like you're oversensitized. It seems like every shadow is a creature behind it. And so we're walking down there, we're going through there. And then as we're headed in the canyon, we're headed kind of southeast. You could hear on the right sound like two creatures that were trailing us, and one on the left. And it sounded like they were just closing in on us. And Patrick's getting scared. Chewy's kind of freaking out. This time I was carrying a 40 Smith & Wesson, and I always have 3 clips on me with those. The types of rounds, I don't remember what they're called, but they're pretty awesome. And so I'm carrying that. We've got a spotlight, and we've got flashlights. And we didn't turn on any spot or flashlights. We wanted our eyes to get used to the darkness so we could see any movement, because once you hit a light, then they know that you know. And so we were always trying to give these things the upper hand, because I found out that if you do that, they're more comfortable coming out. And again, this is crazy. I don't recommend anybody being stupid like this. So we're going down there, and we're hearing things to the left and right of us. We're hearing sounds like humming or low growling. I don't know what it was. And then it kind of just penetrated your chest and just gave you that feeling of flight, that dread sense. And we're not taking the bait. I said, guys, we're not taking the bait. Let's just keep going. And Chewy talked about how a lot of the Russian olives grow like a canopy in there. It's darker under the canopy than in the moonlight. And so I said, let's go in the canopy. Let's just go press our luck. We go in that canopy, and we're hearing these sounds. We're hearing things moving. And all of a sudden, Chewy just hits the spotlight in the bushes, and there's movement, and there was a black mass, and it disappeared because this is thick cover. And as we're walking, I said, all right, let's shut off their lights. And Patrick, he's getting really nervous. He's saying, Dad, I'm getting scared. I'm not scared of anything, but this is scaring me. And it's bringing up other encounters that he had when he was a kid while we were up camping north Idaho. And so we're going. And all of a sudden, there's a creek that runs through there called Rock Creek. Now, as a kid, have you ever picked up a boulder and threw it in the water where you get that kerplunk sound?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, we hear a kerplunk, and we freeze. And I said, everybody stop. And we hit the lights. And I said, did you guys hear that boulder? Now, let me tell you something about the terrain of where we're at. There's no small boulders for you to pick up. I know the area, and so does Chewy, but like the back of our hand, because we're down there all the time. We spend our lunch breaks on Fridays down there talking cryptid and going through the things at daytime. And this boulder had to be either thrown up 80 yards from the cliff canyon or it was carried down. And I couldn't pick this boulder up because later that next weekend, I went back and I think I found the boulder that was thrown in the river. And so we're going, and then I flashed my light over to the right of us, and Patrick starts coming unglued. He starts screaming and wailing and crying that I've never heard a full-grown man do. And then all of a sudden, Chewy starts he says, there it is. We've got our pistols drawn. And I didn't see a thing, but Chewy and Patrick did, and they saw eye shine. And Patrick described this thing as minimum 8 feet tall and at least 600 to 800 pounds because of where he could see it standing. Again, that next weekend, Chewy and I went back and we found a sandbar that it was probably standing on. But when I went back to get a closer look, it was gone and something had gone up and made a trail up through the thick brush. And we're going to, it's time to get out of here. We're like just really freaked out. And then I'm thinking for a Halloween special, this was good. But now it gets better. I said, let's go back to the brush where Chewy had found some tracks previous, and they looked like Sasquatch tracks. I think they were close to 16 inches long. There were no toe prints, but where these were found, nobody should have been. And there was a time where Chewy and I were down in there looking around, and all of a sudden we got lost and we got separated. Now this is a small area. It's like getting lost and separated in your backyard. Shouldn't have happened. And there was about a 15, 20-minute time delay from the time that we knew what time it was to the time we found each other again on the trail. It was really weird. So I said, let's go back there and see if we can experience that. And we get back there, and my son looks around, and about I'm not joking, less than 20 yards from me, he's screaming and pointing, and I whip around with my handgun drawn, ready to fire, and there is a 4-point mule deer buck, mature, probably weighed 175 pounds without dressing it out. And its back leg looks like it'd been almost twisted off, and it's just hanging there. And it's coming towards us. And I'm freaking out and say, guys, we've interrupted a hunt. We are in trouble. We need to get the heck out of here. And so we went around that deer, and we took off, and we could hear things. It sounded like things that were trailing us. And we basically got back up to the rim of the canyon, and we got in my son's car, and we took off. But that was our Halloween special.
Yeah, you guys are crazy going back. Why do you keep going back, Raymond? Is it just curiosity?
It's curiosity. It's available. I want more answers, and the only way you're going to find answers is either by somebody telling you their experiences or you experience yourself. Because of some of the trauma that I experienced from a child from some of these cryptids, I'm looking for answers. What are these? How do they play in the big overall plan? Why is the government hiding this from us? Why are we not told about these things? If we were told at a young age about Sasquatch in the woods and how to watch out for them, it would not stop your average outdoorsman like myself or Chewy to go out there, because you would be so traumatized and you know how to deal with these things.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Let me ask you, Raymond, and I know I'm going to interview you regarding your own encounters. What do you think that this Dogman thing is? And I'm going to ask you too as well, Chewy, but what do you think, Raymond, that this Dogman creature is that people are seeing?
I think it could be several things. I don't like to say this is the answer and there's no other questions about it. This is what it is. I think it is a multitude of things. Number one, I think some of these things possibly could be human under demonic power that transform, because I've physically seen that myself, whether it was an illusion or bone and bone shifted and skin shaped, and my dad can attest to seeing that happen before. Number two, it possibly could, some of the newer ones could possibly be something that has been made genetically by the government. Three, these things could be old as time itself, from maybe the pre-flood, the antediluvian times. Again, being a man of faith, I've got to go with the Genesis 6 understanding of angels interbreeding with humans and coming out with all kinds of chimeras and things like that. Because if you look in the antiquities, there have been human remains found all over the world, and they've been taken up and destroyed. And I got a story about a guy that has firsthand knowledge of a giant human skull 3 times the size of a normal skull on a reservation. But those are my 3 best guesses right now. Could some of them be quote unquote from another dimension or alien? Well, it depends on what you believe and what you've experienced. I'm not prepared to discuss that right now, but those are my three best guesses for right now.
I hear you. And you may not be too far off on your guesses. And before I get back to Chewy, Raymond, what's kind of the ultimate goal going down there? I mean, what are you guys hoping to accomplish? Is it just kind of a way to get out and kind of adrenaline junkies, or do you guys have a goal kind of going into that canyon?
My goal is this. We found shredded tents, we found shredded clothes, we found children's shoes, we found a plethora of things. And what I want to do is I hope that we can get out on a lot of podcasts and things like that to give people information, because information is power. Knowledge is power. And if you know these things are there, and if you know people that have lived through these experiences, there is hope. You're not alone, and there are ways to deal with these things. And I want to take back the fear that was put into me when I was a young child. I want to take my life back to a certain extent. After my first Sasquatch encounter, I can never enjoy the woods again. I can't go to the woods and take a nap and not, because every time I go out there, I'm thinking, okay, not today, not today. I do not want to see one today, unless I'm prepared and I'm ready. If I'm deer hunting, I don't want to see one of those stinky things, or dogman. I want them to stay away. Now, if I want to search them out or just look for evidence, I'll go and enjoy it. And I'm starting to have things manifest more and more in the woods. And so again, back to the original question, sorry, I got off on a tangent. I want information to share. And as an investigator, as what I do for a living, I can take the facts and I can put them in a sheet where I can give you the facts of what I've seen and what has happened. And you can draw from your own conclusions and on where you want to stand, and maybe it'll give you some information to fight with so that you're not a victim of these things anymore and you've taken your life back.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, tell me about the tents. You and Chewy found campsites down there? Look like they were abandoned?
There's no campsites down there. You're not allowed to camp down there. There used to be a huge hobo population. It's not there anymore. I used to go down there and feed and bring water bottles and food for these guys, because I ran a food bank, and it was a way to reach out and help my fellow man. I was down there with my wife and my youngest daughter. We were just walking. I own pit bulls. I don't raise them. I own them. I've always loved pit bulls. They've always been a great breed for me. I've taken my little female down there just to exercise her because I'm thinking about turning her into a bird dog. And off the trail on the side in the bushes, where again there's a canopy, a whole nother world. If you don't penetrate that canopy, you won't see the world underneath the trees. It's like something from Lord of the Rings. I found a tent that somebody had staked, and it had been grabbed and pulled, and the stakes had been pulled out. And then all these items, personal items, were thrown everywhere. And then I found a gun casing from a .380 auto pistol. So I don't know what happened. So I took pictures and I sent them to Chewy. And then the next day I went down there because I was going to collect the evidence to see if I can find anything else. The place had been cleaned up like nothing ever happened.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
That's really creepy. Chewy, what do you think that this dogman thing is?
Well, just to touch base real quick, what Raymond says, yeah, that is creepy, man. And this is down the street from my house, where you have the tent that has been destroyed, the campsite, empty shell casings, but there's no people, there's no blood, there's no bodies, there's nothing. And we find random shredded shoe, a shredded shirt thrown in the tree, weird stuff out there. So what I think dogman is, I'm stuck in between. Either there's different kinds, because they do stuff that is not normal. They do stuff that seemingly they can appear and disappear really quick, out of nowhere, and they can instill fear into you, and then they follow you home, they harass you, and that's not normal for an animal to do. But at the same time, they eat food, like the deer we saw on Halloween night, this big old buck with its leg twisted, like something was grabbed its leg and tried to what has strength and hands to grab a full grown deer and twist its leg off? You know what I'm saying? And so I'm like, man, will they eat food They leave footprints, but they follow, they do stuff that's not normal. So my mindset is like, I'm stuck in between. It's a spiritual thing, and then part of me is like, oh, it's an undocumented, some kind of canine that, that's just hasn't been science, the mainstream science hasn't accepted it yet. I always like to say, if they do discover it, I have a name for it already. I'd like to call it Canis lupus erectus. I think that'd be kind of a cool name to have if it was a real flesh and blood creature. So that's where I'm at. I'm stuck in. I can't give you a definite answer because I'm stuck in between, man, because I see them do flesh and blood stuff, and then they do weird, like, spiritual stuff or something.
Yeah, it's bizarre, especially the footprints, going from one house to the next. And I know you're out there in the country. Does it worry you at all going down to the canyon?
Well, definitely it does worry me. There's times I go down there and again, like, just so like, it's a beautiful area. It's down the street from my house, and I think about it. I was wrestling with it, like, I'm never going again. I'm never going fishing down there. I'm never taking my family on the bike ride down there. There's always people down there, but it's like, why do I live in fear? And it's like, do I choose not to go down the street from my house? That's so beautiful, where people travel all around the world to go to. Do I do that? And I made my decision not to do that. So I do go down to the canyon, and I go on bike rides with my family. We take guns now. We make sure our phones are fully charged. We put our kids between us. We just practice caution. But I am more alert going down there. But it's just such a beautiful area. I don't want to miss out, because I live in Idaho. It's like, we're all about hiking and fishing and just enjoying God's creation, and I don't want that to stop. If I didn't want to go and investigate or search the area out, I'd never leave my home, because it's all around me. I'd just be confined to home and never leave.
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. From going back to that campsites you were telling me about, or were people, I'm going to call them campsites because there was tents and stuff like that, even though it's not traditional camping. What do you think happened down there, Chewy? Do you think someone died down there, or do you think that someone just abandoned it and left their garbage? What's kind of your gut feeling?
Well, my gut feeling, that I know something happened, something bad happened. I personally think that some kind of cryptid, one of these creatures, got somebody, because you're not supposed to camp down there, but people do it anyway. And I think that this person had a rude awakening at night, and all he got was one shot off. And he only got one shot off, and that's all it took. The person, I think, was taken, because there was no blood, there was nothing, just his possessions and his tent, and he only got one bullet off. And we'll never hear about that on the news. You'll never see it. And I have those pictures, and I'll send those to you as well. And down there in the canyon, I'll send you all these pictures, of my roof, of the tent. There's a giant canine print, not like the one on my ceiling or my roof. My roof was like an elongated one. This one just looks like a giant wolf print. It's as big as my hand. And we could, Raymond and I were down there, and we could, in the snow, it left its footprint, and I took a picture of it. My hand is right next to it, and it's as big as my hand, and it's just a pad of the wolf print, but it's following a buck deer. You could see it following the tracks, and I'll show you those pictures. And the tracks go off into the brush, and in the same area, I'll send you this picture too. I have my foot next to what looks like a Bigfoot print. It's like twice the size of my foot, and at least twice the width, just down there in the canyon. And so I think personally, and also with the whole missing 411 just being an hour and a half away, and people coming up missing, man, and I think that person was taken that night, and it got covered up somehow or something.
What do you mean the missing 411 being an hour and a half away? Are you talking about a different location from where you're at?
Well, yeah, I'm talking about where David Pilates, they made their first film, their documentary film and it was filmed. A big portion of it was in Pocatello or Idaho Falls, with that kid who came up missing over there, who's still missing. So I think I put all that stuff into play. It's like a big picture And I think about all the accounts that are in our area from like Hell's Canyon, Devil's Corral, the Hairy Man of Birch Creek, the Walking Whistling Bear. All this area is just really, really weird. And there's so many people that come up missing in our area, and the first, what really kind of opened my eyes too is when I was camping in Stanley, which is Redfish, a beautiful area. We go down there, and this is the first time I go camping in a tent. Every year I go camping, it's always in a tent. We rough it out. It's awesome. But we go in this tent in the middle of the mountains, and I go to the ranger station, and I get a map of the campsites and stuff, and the ranger tells me, he goes, "Hey, there's a camera crew out here looking for Bigfoot." And the ranger is telling me this. I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, there's been reports of him in the campsites and taking people's coolers and stuff of their food." And I'm like blown away. I'm like, "That's awesome." So I go and we pitch our tent. We go to the secluded place, and it's me, my wife, my first daughter, my second one wasn't born yet, and I have two nieces. So we all go out there and we're walking, and I take a stick, and I've seen it on the Bigfoot shows, right? They hit the tree with the stick. So I did that, and we got a reply back from way out in the valley. And we were laughing. It was like a joke for us. We're like, "No way, the ranger was right. He's out here, whatever." And I heard him scream too in the show, Bev. And I did a yell. And dude, I give you my word, bro. We had a yell that yelled back from way up in the valley, like bellowed through the valley, dude. And I couldn't even do it that loud. And it just bellowed through that valley, and it scared the crap out of us. And my wife's like, "Okay, stop messing around." I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to stop." And that was our second day there. The first night, our campsite, all these deer would come up to us. Literally, they'd come up and we'd give them marshmallows. You could feed them marshmallow by hand. Just open your hand and they would eat it out of your hand. It's the cutest thing. And they'd have little ones with them. And my daughter and nieces, they loved it. It was so nice. And all the birds around. Well, that night, there was no deer. There was no birds, nothing. And I remember thinking strange. It was like, "Oh man, we were waiting for the deer to come out. Wanted to take more pictures of them and stuff." So we go to sleep, and we're in two separate tents. My nieces are in one. Me, my wife, and my baby are in the other one. There's about 10 feet between us. And we're sleeping, and a growl wakes me up that's between my tents. I'm talking about a growl that it wakes you up because you feel it. I remember feeling it like it vibrated like bass or something. And I didn't say a word, and my wife woke up at the same time. She says, "Did you hear that?" She whispered it, and I said, "I heard that. It was a growl." And she goes, "Oh," she goes, "Did you fart?" She goes, "It smells so bad." And I remember like smelling it, like it was putrid. It smelled really, really bad. And I knew, I was like, "Babe, that's Bigfoot. That's him. He's out there, and we're whispering it, and we didn't hear any movement. So I got my flashlight. I didn't turn it on, and I unzipped the tent really quick, and I did like a Rambo roll, and I swept the area with the flashlight. Dude, there was nothing there. There was nothing there. And I walked around the tent a little bit. I was pretty scared. There was nothing there. And I was trying to figure out, like, did it disappear, or is it like hiding behind a tree and I don't see it, or what? But I heard it. It woke us up, and we could smell it, and I could still smell the smell. So I got my nieces, and we combined one tent, and I didn't sleep at all that night, and I didn't hear anything else. Like, there was no other wildlife in the area that night. So
Yeah.
so all this stuff, in our area, I believe that people do get taken, man, and that they're not going to get reported, right? Dead men tell no tales. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll ask Raymond when I interview him, but I want to ask you, Chewy, what do you think Sasquatch is?
I think that Sasquatch is a flesh and blood creature, like the patty kind. I don't even know what type it is, but the patty kind of a Sasquatch. I think it's like some kind of hominid, some kind of undocumented species of like a humanoid type of a thing. And then you have the other ones, like what I've just started to research is like the beast of seven shoots, the ones that have snouts that look like baboons. I think those two are just flesh and blood creatures. I do think that the ones that are like Patty have special powers, even because I've I've heard stories of them communicating with people's minds, doing weird stuff, but I think they're a flesh and blood creature. But like I'm a believer that like even Native Americans, they hold special powers to this land where they can do stuff because all the thousands of years on this land. I think that they can do the same thing. Like they can communicate with animals, they can do different things, but I do think that they're a flesh and blood creature. But when you start getting into the different types of them, I don't know, man, it starts to get really dark.
Yeah, it's definitely bizarre. Hopefully we'll have answers one day. And I really appreciate you coming on, but I want to tell you, Chewy, if anything else happens at the house, will you call me? I mean, you have my cell phone number, or shoot me a text.
Oh, absolutely, dude. I will call. Like I said, nothing has happened really since I put those crosses and buried them on my property and put anointing oil. But if something happens, absolutely, I got your number.
Hey,
Yeah.
Wes, this is Raymond.
Yeah, Raymond.
We plan on doing another Halloween special, if you're interested in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then we want to start doing some of this stuff. We're trying to find a way to do it live. Can you imagine going into the field like that with that kind of activity live? There's nobody else doing that I know of, and Shane and I have been trying to figure out a way to do that.
Yeah, you'll have to, well, we could chat about it offline. I mean, there's different ways to do it down in that canyon, but, I'm a little concerned that if this thing's following Chewy back up, to his home, what the hell is this thing and why is it following him back up to his home? I definitely have had reports of Dogman and Sasquatch all in the same area. You guys got to be careful down there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But, well, I'm hoping that whatever it is doesn't like dark meat, that it prefers white meat.
Oh, Chewy, you're too much, man. You're too much. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Chewy. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, you bet, man. You bet. And I'm glad that I can share all this information. And people who know our area, I wouldn't recommend coming down to this canyon like we know the area like the back of our hand, and even like that we get lost. So I would just say the main reason I go to this canyon is because it's my backyard. Yeah, I'm literally down the street, and I want to go fishing. I go on daddy-daughter dates down there. We go on family bike rides. I mean, that's not going to stop. So it's not like I only go there just to see what's down there. I want to know. I want answers, like Raymond says, but I'm an Idahoan, and camping, hiking, fishing, biking, all that is in my blood, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, Raymond, I can't wait to interview you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I've been listening to you for years, and I'm a big fan. I've learned quite a bit from your guys' work.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks again, fellas.
Yep, you bet.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Until next time, everyone.
About limitless, infinite life. She is my thunder. No wonder I'm going under the intoxicating danger I like. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Let me float away. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. An epiphany, bring the shore to life. Save me from myself, let me drown.